Good day, everyone. So today our topic is all about the chapter 14, the comparison of cognitive and metacognitive factors in learning. So in the study of learning, one cannot do away with cognition as being associated with intellectual capacity. So basically, it is a given that intellectual capacity explain a big part of learning to occur. So this chapter seeks to present the different concepts related to cognition and metacognition. It also tries to draw the line between these two concepts and clarifies what delineates these two from each other. So cognition, it is refers to all the mental processes and abilities in which people use or engage on a daily basis. So examples is of such mental processes are memory learning, problem solving, evaluation, reasoning, and decision making. Another example no sa memory is that recalling a forgotten phone number or a childhood memory. One of the examples of cognition. Another example is that understanding a story while reading a book or having a conversation. So here is another example. So course subject title, physical science. So this is a K to 12 senior high school core curriculum physical science. So content, how the elements found in the universe to perform. So here in the learning competencies, cognitive skills, and the metacognitive skills. So first sa learning competencies is give evidence and explain the formation of the light elements in the Big Bang Theory. Next is give evidence for and describe the formation of heavier elements during star formation and evolution. Next, write the nuclear fusion reactions that take place in stars which lead to the formation of new elements. And lastly, describe how elements that are heavier than iron are formed. So, nganong ang four learning competencies is belong siya sa metacognitive skills. So, all the above stated expected learning competencies are identified as metacognitive skills because doing this will require the use of basic cognition skills like identifying, understanding, recalling, and similar skills. So, on the other hand, metacognition is defined as thinking about thinking. So when we say thinking about thinking, it allows an individual to complete a task through planning, monitoring, evaluating, and comprehending. So cognitive processes allow normal functions of individuals, but metacognition takes to a higher level, making it a person more aware of his cognitive processes. So another definition of metacognition, it refers both to the knowledge people have about their own cognitive processes and intentional use of certain cognitive processes to facilitate learning and memory by Ormrod 2015. We're studying, we also matter kanang study habits na to and also improve the learning strategies nga mas makasabot ta sa ato ang studyhan. So it is one of the metacognition as it states it is thinking about thinking. So dili lang more about think about their study habits but also improving their learning strategies. So the difference between metacognitive knowledge and metacognitive regulation is that metacognitive knowledge is what you know about thinking and learning, while metacognitive regulation is what you do to control and monitor your thinking. So for example, sa metacognitive knowledge, so knowing, so for example, si student A, knowing na siya slow reader sa specific na chapter, mag-use siya og method nga mas madali niya masabtan ang katong specific na chapter. So, mag-use siya flashcard. While sa metacognitive regulation naman is what you do to control and monitor your thinking. So, example, when a learner is studying a difficult chapter, kanang in order nga mas sayo na saya to understand is i-read niya ang katong specific chapter twice or monitor ang iyang understanding by asking himself sa question. It is a reflective after each paragraph in order to evaluate nga ang iyang performance, how well he can answer a practice quiz at the end. So, metacognition is the awareness of the self as the knower. It is a higher order knowledge about your own thinking as well as the ability to use this knowledge to manage one's cognition processes such as comparison and problem solving. So there are 4 types of knowledge used in metacognition processes. First is the declarative knowledge. So first, declarative knowledge. It is a knowledge about the self as a learner, factors that influence the person's learning and memory, and the skills, so strategies and resources needed to perform a task. So one of the examples, the declarative knowledge of metacognition processes, is that when a learner learns best by reading before bed, or I need to write out each step of math problem in order for me to understand more. And then one knowledge about oneself as a learner is that you know your weaknesses and strengths. So for example, you might know that you are good at memorizing facts but struggle with complex problem solving, right? You know kung asa ka mas maayo mo part. And then you need to understand what the task requires. Another example gihapon, for instance, you know that writing an essay requires research, outlining, and drafting. So another example, when you are struggling in you're struggling in studying, so you might know some of the methods nga mas mapadali sa imuha to understand. So you can use the flashcards, ineffective for memorizing vocabulary words or anything nga makatabang siya in order for you nga mas mapadali ang imuhang pag-study. Is the procedural knowledge. It is knowing how to use strategies in different occasions or conditions. So ang procedural knowledge, it is know-how or knowledge of how to perform tasks and use strategies. So it involves step-by-step guidelines, algorithms, and method for completing a skills. So it is a specific skills and techniques needed to accomplish a goal, or like knowing the steps to solve a math problem or anything na maka-create a projects. You need to know the specific techniques or steps in order for you to accomplish a specific task pod. So for example, another example for procedural knowledge, in order for you to understand better, you need to apply any strategies that may help you. So it is a knowledge on how to apply strategies such as note-taking. It is one of the procedural knowledge example. Note-taking method or reading comprehension technique. Next is self-regulating knowledge. So knowing the condition as to when to apply the procedures and strategies to ensure completion of task. So self-regulating knowledge, it is the learner's understanding of their own strength, weaknesses, and strategies for learning, which they use to plan, monitor, and evaluate their learning processes. So this involves knowing what to do, knowing when to do it, and why it is an effective strategy to achieve a specific learning goals. So the example is that when a self-regulating student so for example, when a student, when for example, when si student A realize that wala niya nasabtan ang iyahang ginabasa nga history. Iyaha lang siyang ginabasa and then consciously decided niya nga i-read ang katong history nga topic para mas masabtan niya. So it is a strategy na effective for comprehension. Reread. This specific student is using a metacognition by monitoring their understanding and then applying the self-regulation by selecting a relevant strategies nga ma-fix niya ang problem. So, ang iyahang relevant strategies dito is katong nag-reread niya ang history nga topic niya para mas masabtan niya, which is na-solve nito nga problem na tong una, bisa nagbasa siya, wala niya nasabtan. So, that is an self-regulating knowledge example. Next is the metacognitive knowledge. It refers to general knowledge about how human beings learned and processed information, as well as individual knowledge of one's own learning processes. So, for example, kanang ako, para sa ko, mas productive kung mag-study ko sa room o maminaw og music than studying sa library. So, the knowledge of a task includes knowledge about the nature of the task as well as the type of processing skills required of the individual. So, the individual may know that he is able to read a novel faster with the understanding that he would a physics book. So, the knowledge about strategies include knowledge about cognitive and metacognitive strategies and when and where it is appropriate to use such strategies. So, metacognitive strategies are sequential processes. One uses to control cognitive strategies and to ensure the cognitive goal has been met. So now let's move on to the factors associated with the development of cognitive. So first, children become more aware of the limitations of their memories. As they grow older, they realize that their memories are not perfect. So, sa mga bata, sa factors associated with development of the cognitive, aware ang mga bata sa lang limitations sa ilahang memories, and as they grow older, mas na-realize sa mga bata na ang ilahang memories kay dili perfect. Next is children become better able to identify the things they know and they do not know. Kung mas aware ang mga students or ang mga bata sa limitations sa lang memories, in this next kay ang children become more better, mas dali nilang ma-identify ang mga butang nga ilahang nahibalaan ug ang ilahang wala nga nahibaan. And lastly, as they grow older, children become more knowledgeable about effective learning strategies. So as they more aware and they more better able to identify the things that they do not know and they know, mas knowledgeable sila enough to discover the new strategies or methods sa mga learning na mas mapadali sa iyaha to understand. And next, so the development of metacognitive skills goes with age, with guidance, experience, and it means that a younger children may not be able or skilled thinkers as the older ones. So for teachers, therefore, this has implications for starting the development of metacognitive skills early, so and seeing to it that applying the strategies for developing metacognition is sustained across subjects and grade levels. So next, there is two theories organize the skills of metacognition into two components ang theories. First one is the regulation of cognition. So it involves setting goals and planning, monitoring and controlling learning and evaluating one's own regulation. So it is assessing result and the strategies used. Knowledge of cognition with three components. So first, knowledge of the factors that influence one's own performance. So there are factors that influence one's own performance. So first, there are about motivations. There are two types of motivations: intrinsic motivation and extrinsic motivation. So they are motivated by a self-satisfaction from internal feelings of achievements. So it influences one's own performance. And another example, kung ma-recognize ka, so it means that mas gana pa kang perform since na kay maka-recognition, benefits, and also compensation. So it can be tokens, so that. So next is knowing different strategies to use for learning. So there are types or methods of strategies that can be applied in studying. So there are active recall or kanang self-testing. So after reading the notes, the topic, mura siya i-question imong self kung na ba ka nasabtan, more answering a test. So it is to kung na ba kay na-learn sa imong gi-read. And so there are types of strategies na makahelp siya to improve once a student na maka-learn sa ihang studies. And so there are also peer teaching, collaborative learning. So there are many methods that can be applied, that can be improve sa mga student to help them study. So next, knowing what strategy to use for a specific learning situation. So before mano kay it is knowing different strategies. So after knowing different strategies, of course, as a student, you should know when or how to use specific learning situation. So first, identify the specific learning situation, then match it with appropriate techniques like active recall for memorization, spaced repetition for long-term retention, or scenario-based learning for practical application. So for example, kung mag-memorize kag facts and concepts, unsa may mga strategies nga dapat gamiton nimo in order nga mapadali ug sayon na para sa imuha. So there are active recall, spaced repetition, mnemonics. So active recall kanang it tests yourself regularly to pull information from your memories. So for example, magbasa ka og topic ninyo, for example history, memorize nimo ang katong mga names or mga scenario like mga dates. So after before nimo siya nga ma-memorize or ma-active recall, you need to reread the text para after ito na kay ma-memorize, na kay ma-active recall. Next is spaced repetition. So reviewing the materials or the topic at increasing intervals to strengthen long-term memories. So kung understanding complex topics naman, so there are an appropriate strategies like summarizing, questioning. So next is a metacognitive strategies to facilitate learning. So teachers and trainers can apply the following suggested strategies to develop metacognitive learning skills of their students. So first is ask questions. So during formal courses or during klase, so as a future educator, you should ask a question that allows the learners to reflect kung unsa ang iyahang nasabtan on their own learning processes and strategies. And in collaborative learning naman, so you need to ask the students kung unsa lang na-reflect sa mga role play and when engaged in problem solving as a group, unsa ang iyahang masay, unsa iyahang reflective nga nasabtan. And next is a foster self-reflection. So it emphasizes the importance of personal reflection during and after learning experience. So as a future educator, you need to encourage the learner to critically analyze sa ilahang kagalingon assumptions, and how they will how may have this kanang influence sa ilahang learning. So a foster self-reflection. Next is encourage self-questioning. So encourage self-questioning. You need to foster the independent learning by asking the student or the learners to generate their own question and answer them to enhance comprehension. So for example, kana may basa sila og text, and then kung unsa ilahang wala nasabtan ato nga time is they need to formulate the question, and then ang teacher mao yung answer sa katong question in order para ma-enhance ang comprehension sa students. So the question can be related to their personal goals or kanang mga muna na nasabtan sila ang mga topic or studies. The next is teach strategies directly. So teach explicitly or implicitly appropriate metacognitive strategies as part of the lesson or as part of a training courses. Next is promote autonomous learning. So when learners have some domain knowledge, encourage participation. So you need to dapat encourage imong student to participate in any activity para ma-challenge ang iyang learning experiences, and they will then be forced, so ma-force silang to construct their own metacognitive strategies kay tungod sa imong pag-encourage participation na sa learning ato, and then in the end maka-construct sila sa ilang own metacognitive strategies. Next, provide access to mentors. So students maka-learn sila through interacting with peers who are more slightly advanced, and allowed experience where novices can observe the proficient use of a skill and then gain access to the metacognitive strategies of their mentors. Of course, can you provide access to mentors? It can also happen in the classroom. And next is solve problems with a team or group. So cooperative problem solving can enhance metacognitive strategies by discussing possible approaches with team members and learning from each other. So ang kani solve problems with a team or group, mga silang nag-brainstorming in order to solve a problem. So there are mga ideas sa mga members na they can solve the specific problem. Next is think aloud. So teach learners how to think aloud and report their thoughts while performing a difficult task. So a knowledgeable partner or the teacher can then point out errors in thinking, or the individual can use this approach for increased self-awareness during learning. And next is self-explanation. So self-explanation in writing or speaking can help learners improve their comprehension or a difficult subject. So self-explanation by writing or speaking, mas ma-improve din mo ang comprehension, mas ma-improve ang comprehension sa usa ka student sa mga difficult subject. Next, and lastly, provide opportunities for making errors. So, providing this opportunity to learners stimulates reflection on the causes of their errors. So, dapat na kay safe, what I mean if na kay comfortable environment, even making errors is not kanang dili maulaw ang students. So, provide opportunities kung magkamali man galing ang students. So next is the strategies that develop self-regulation. So the important strategies regarding development of metacognition towards self-regulation is further emphasized. So all of these activities are cognitive in nature. So first, teach students that the ability to learn is not a fixed quantity. The students should be taught that ability to learn is a trait that is developed over time and that it is not a fixed trait. Second is teach students how to set goals and plan to meet them. Lastly is give students the opportunity for self-monitoring and adapting. So, according to Paris and Winograd on 2009, claimed that as a student, develop competencies for self-appraisal and self-management, they become metacognitively alert. So they also become more conscious of their own thinking state, the demands of the task, and their own strategies for influencing their learning. So according to 2009, teachers can develop their students' awareness of thinking using the following strategies. So first, sharpening the students' alertness and observation skill ang learners to reflect and indicate kung unsang ilahang nasabtan sa specific sa katong nga lesson. And then during kanang question time, then encourage po sa teacher ang students to elaborate their answer. And always encourage dapat sa teacher further elaboration of their answers to assess the maturity of their answers. So next is to provide explicit and clear instruction and modeling. So explaining with concrete examples, illustrate or model that model the skills and allow for practice or for role play of the situation. So example, how to show honesty in a different situation. Next is encourage peer evaluation. So during the question time, it should be the teacher should encourage the students to evaluate on the given responses by peers. So dapat gina-evaluate ang mga responses sa iyahang mga friends. And lastly, providing questions for enhancing reflection. So you need to apply Socratic questioning. So these are questions asked for students to give the following kinds of response. So like for example, clear, it can, for example, can you elaborate further? So when it clear. And then next is precise. So makahatag pa kag more details sa topic or sa imong nasabtan. And of course, the accurate. How can we verify or test that? And relevant. So kanang how does that relate to the problem? And deep. So which factors make this difficult problem? So broad and less broad. So do we need, kanang example niya is, do we need to have another point of view? And lastly, the logical. So how it is consistent with what you explained earlier. So those are kanang mga examples of mga question that can enhance your reflective question. So lastly, there are some use also the de bonus
thinking hats. So in processing students' response, so there are kanang napay another methods na or task na pwede gamiton or pwede apply sa classroom. So the development thinking hat. So nadiri yellow hat. So yellow hat is a good point. So for example sa yellow hat ng mga question is that what are all the good points about? So pwede na siya katong dili na ka magkatong clear, precise nga mga word ni mong gamiton. Pwede na ka magamit sa mga hot. So yellow hot, it indicates good points, and black hat indicates the bad points. So for example, the question here from reflective, to enhance the reflective question kay what could have gone wrong? And next, the white hat, the information. So kaning example nga mga question sa white hat is katong WH nga mga question like what, when, why, who, and how questions. So red hat naman is katong mga feelings. So example sa mga feelings related nga mga question is that what do you feel about the result of this activity? Unsa mo na feel karon nga activity nga to ang gihimo? And the blue hat, thinking about thinking. So what did you learn from the story? And lastly, the green hat, it indicates creativity. So some example of the questions sa green hat kay what else could have been done? So in asking the question and processing students' responses, the teacher can use the above classification of questions and responses. So that's all for the chapter 14, the comparison of cognitive and metacognitive factors in learning.